Here we go again.
Oh, no, not again.
You've seen it before, haven't you?
Dom, how long have we been doing this?
Once more unto the breach, dear friends.
Again and again and again until we're both dead.
Hello and welcome to You've Seen It Before, Movie Reviews Connection to Mind. Tenet is the latest film from Christopher Nolan that is finally hitting theaters and stars, among others, John David Washington, Robert Pattinson, and Kenneth Branagh. And in this film, a CIA operative finds himself recruited into an organization that is trying to prevent World War III, but it is not about nuclear holocaust. It in fact involves a manipulation of time, whereas in certain instances, time seems to invert or events seem to play backwards, at least from his perspective, but they run forward from the inverted perspective. And all this plays out, and things are happening, and our protagonist has to figure out what is going on and who is trying to start a world war that will destroy the entire world and everyone in it. It is all up to this operative, and he has to figure things out quickly, or else time may well run out. Now, this video review will contain spoilers later on in the review. I'm going to try to keep spoilers to a minimum because honestly, this is kind of a confusing movie, or at least to sum up and or to spoil. I, in fact, tried to record the plot of this film twice before because it was kind of complicated. But I'll be giving my spoiler-free thoughts of the movie first and foremost. Then I'll get into my spoiler-filled or analysis or potential for spoilers later on. Just so you know, there will be spoilers later on in the review. But first off, let me get some spoiler-free thoughts on Tenet. Is it a good movie or not? Is it worth your time? More importantly, in these times, is it worth seeing in theaters? This is the film that has been touted as the savior of the cinema. Now that theaters are starting to slowly open back up again, and this film was really released in international markets first before it came to the U.S., and of course, it's still not open everywhere in the U.S. In various markets due to COVID and other things. It isn't even available in all drive-ins when brick and mortar indoor theaters are open. It's a whole mess of a thing. To sum up, is this a good movie? I would say this is a typical Christopher Nolan movie in that it's definitely a must-see, and whether it's good or not is definitely up to the interpretation of whoever sees it and how this movie impacts you. And you can say that about a lot of different movies, but in the case of a Christopher Nolan movie, I'd say that is very much applicable because his movies tend to be very cinematic. They're gorgeous to look at, and this film is no exception. The plots, the storylines are usually there's usually some sort of twist that happens, or that either gets you fully on board or just knocks you out of the way and be like, nope, that just did not work. And then the rest of the movie after that, just you're either totally on board or completely lost, and then that will either turn you on or turn you off to the movie as a whole. And in this film, for me at least, this film worked, but I can understand why it wouldn't work for some people. Let me try to explain that without going into any spoilers at this point. Much like Interstellar, this is definitely a film that is complicated, but by design, and it gives you enough, the exposition of the story gives you enough to figure out at least the basics of what's going on, but there's enough going on out beyond that where you have to be really paying attention, and even then you still probably won't. It'll probably take a few repeat viewings and a lot of thought to dissect exactly what's going on. And either you're willing to dive deeper and try to find those explanations, or you're gonna try to understand the basics, and then beyond that, it's gonna get too confusing, and they're just gonna be like, I just give up. This is the complete nonsense. What is going on? And Interstellar, I think, is a movie that that had a similar sort of thing, especially with its ending. This film not so much the ending. It's definitely, well, the ending for sure, but the nature of the time element of this film is such that the mechanics of it can be hard to follow at times, and you definitely have to be paying attention. And if you're paying attention and you're following along, great. I think this film has a lot to offer you. And from a plot and a story character, it is definitely interesting, and your ability to follow the story is really hinging on how you gravitate towards the characters, and really the main two characters, namely John David Washington and Robert Pattinson. John David Washington, I don't believe he's actually given a real name in the story. He's referred to as the protagonist. Literally, he's referred to as the protagonist in the movie. And he does actually a really good job. Because he was recruited into this organization in this world, he's obviously the audience surrogate, where we're kind of learning along with him. And John David Washington, he gives off a confidence that he's picking things up as they go, and we as the audience can feed off of his confidence to say, all right, he's getting this, and he's actually picking up pretty quickly. He's not like bumbling around trying to figure things out, asking for like half the movie, what's that? What's going on? Hey, what's going on? I'm so confused. I'm so scared. What's going on? He has that confidence, and that, at least for me, propels me into trying to figure things out, or at least trusting that whatever's happening on screen actually makes sense within the world, even if, at least on initial viewing, it might not make sense, but it may make sense later on in the movie as a whole, and I think that's this film's strength. Also, Robert Pattinson does a great job as a supporting role. He plays Neil, who's who recruited by the protagonist to help out with this mission, and the chemistry between the two is actually quite good, though I wish, again, no spoilers for this, but I wish that they kind of explain things away as far as their relationship in this movie, and it makes sense for the movie, but I wish that I could have seen it. That's a complaint I have about this movie. Also, like I said, this film it sort of prides itself on being complicated to watch, and this is definitely a movie that will require multiple viewings to see. However, I think that definitely gets in the way of this film at times, and I think there are certain scenes and certain things that happen in this movie that are clouded by the fact that are purposefully clouded by the fact that, oh yes, it's complicated, you gotta figure it out. It's like, I feel like if you're asking the audience to figure it out in the long run, and the answer that you're trying to figure out is just kind of not really mind-blowing at all, and it's just, or even if it's, or they're using that to hide the fact that there really is no explanation, they just needed a quick workaround, so they say like, oh, this is complicated but it has an explanation, and I don't have necessarily an explanation of how we get from point D to point G or whatever. Hey, it's just complicated. There we go. Well, that's our explanation. Moving on. There are a couple of instances I feel like that this movie does that, and that's to this film's detriment. And I can definitely see that turning people off. And again, this is going to require multiple viewings. I'm going to wait to do multiple viewings once this is released on Blu-ray to rewatch this. And especially, someone pointed out that this definitely, Blu-ray, certain scenes definitely require the captions on, because the characters do have a bad habit of mumbling their lines, or their audios being obscured by the cinematicness of the audio going on, like the music or the action going on, and it's just kind of hard to hear what's going on. And with a complicated movie, you kind of want to hear it when characters are explaining things that are happening. So again, that's sort of a detriment of this movie. But overall, also the antagonist of this film, the villain, played by Kenneth Branagh, he did a good job. I think he does a good job playing a sinister villain, although his motivation is somewhat, I feel like it's been, it wasn't necessarily the best explained. And having seen Kenneth Branagh in Murder on the Orient Express, his Kenneth Branagh's playing a Russian in this film, but his Russian accent sounds very similar to his French Hercule Poirot accent to me, and that was very distracting in my opinion. So the question is, would I recommend seeing this in theaters? If you can see it in a drive-in movie theater, fantastic, definitely go check it out. If you can only see it, if it's only available in an indoor theater in your area, please do it safely. Please follow the health the restrictions that the theaters are putting in place. They got to follow these rules, and we got to follow these rules to keep the theaters in business as such as they are. But if you can, please do it safely, but please go check this out. This is definitely a cinematic experience worthy of the big screen and of very booming speakers. And if I was going to give Tenet a letter grade, I would say this is a solid A. Not an A+, not an A-. There's definitely some things to work out, but a solid A. This is definitely a movie to rewatch, if only to find out what's going on. So those are my spoiler-free thoughts on Tenet. Now let's get into some spoiler analysis, where I give some attention to certain plot developments and character arcs that may seem familiar to you and where you may have seen them before. Now, the fact, again, I'm going to try to keep this, even though this is talking about spoilers, I'm going to try and keep it as spoiler-free or minimal spoilers as possible. The fact that Neil is, because of the way time works in this film, effect precedes cause, or at least that's how they see it. We see that Neil, Robert Pattinson's character, is recruited by the protagonist, but in fact that even though we see them theoretically for the first time meeting, in fact that they've been partners for many years in this mission, and he's catching Neil's catching the protagonist at the early end of their relationship, whereas Neil is at the end of their relationship. I think this is similar in a dynamic to River Song in the reboot of Doctor Who, where River Song is a character that the Doctor has had adventures with, but when we first encounter her in the series, we see that she encounters him at a time where he hasn't, there are experiences that they've shared that he hasn't experienced yet, but she has, and she has to keep that from him, and ignorance is their ammunition, as it were, and she has to keep things from him so that things can happen as they did. There's a certain dynamic comparison to be made there. Also, just as far as general observations as time goes, like other movies where time either goes forward and backwards, or you have characters going back in time and seeing alternate versions of themselves. Just a couple of things that popped into mind. First off, the Star Trek Next Generation episode Timescape, where the crew find Captain Picard and a couple and other members of his crew encounter the Enterprise and a Romulan warbird frozen in time, and in a temporal anomaly that makes time go forwards and then backwards again, and then backwards and go forwards again, or time move really slow, and then they have to interact on that regard. Again, not a one-to-one comparison, but a similar kind of vibe there. Also, I'd be remiss to not mention Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, in that our main characters go back in time and realize that actions that they encounter, events that they encountered were in fact them from the future interacting with those events, and them dealing with inevitability or things that happened because they happened before. That's a dynamic that shows up in this movie. Those are my main points of comparison. Really, I didn't want to go too deep into comparisons, but I just thought that would be give a brief vibe into that into this. Like I said, even the Neil thing, that's sort of a minor reveal even at the very end. It's not really a huge thing into the movie. So like I said, I tried to keep spoilers at a minimum with this point, because you really want to see this for yourself. And honestly, it would take a lot longer of a video to try to dissect everything that happens in the movie, because there's a lot. So I'm going to leave it at that. And what did you think of Tenet if you've seen it already? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What about my analysis? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Did I miss something? I probably missed something. Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate whatever audience I can get. And if you liked this video or any other video on my channel, please give me a like, share, and especially a subscribe. I'd very much appreciate it. Be sure to tune in for my next review, which assuming all goes well, will be for Wonder Woman 1984, which is currently scheduled for October 2nd. So yeah, look for that. And again, thank you guys so much for watching. And if you're going to go out to the theater, please do it safely. Please follow the guidelines. You don't want to ruin it for the people who are following the rules. We want to keep the theaters in business as such as they are. So thank you for watching. Just remember, there is nothing new under the sun. And yes, you have seen it before.